right. We all saw what happened and did nothing about it.
We had our chance when the cops came.
They asked us if we saw anything.
And we all said no.
We
should have told the cops what we saw.
But we kept our mouths shut.
Look.
Written and directed by Thomas Walton, we are talking Camp Pleasant Lake. And this is obviously a slasher movie homaging the kind of slasher movie trend of having these things set in a summer camp a la kind of sleepaway camp or Friday the 13th and things like that. So effectively we have a camp which is designed to recreate a kind of a horror experience, and effectively customers pay to kind of go to this camp for a weekend, and they have a kind of role play effectively of a kind of a masked kind of slasher who's going to hunt them down and kill the camp counsellors and the kind of the guests one by one, and it's kind of like an interactive experience, a little bit like one of these kind of extreme haunts, but over the space of a kind of a weekend and in this kind of camp. Now, this particular camp is actually on the site of a real tragedy, or real in regards to this story. 20 years ago, there was these two young kids that were involved in some type of strangeness, shall we call it, and inevitably their parents were murdered, and both the kids went on a dark path, let's just say that. And now it appears these masked kind of killer is really killing people in this camp for reals. What'll happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss what I think works in this movie's favour. One of the things here is you do have a cast of recognisable faces of kind of like, you know, horror kind of character actors, the likes of, you know, Andrew Divoff, Bonnie Aarons, Deveni Pin, you've got Robert Lasardo, you've got other recognisable faces here like Jonathan Lipnicki. So there's a reasonable kind of like cast on display here of recognisable kind of character actors and people who have been kind of involved a lot in kind of the horror movie kind of scene across kind of like, you know, decades now really. So that's kind of quite fun. The other thing I would say is those of you who like a high body count, this is quite a high body count. We have a camp full of like adult campers and camp counsellors, the owners, people who work there. There's a large bank of people ultimately for our masked killer to kind of get through. The movie does try to have a little bit of a kind of a mystery and a backstory in regards to kind of setting up the motivation of our kind of antagonist. So, you know, those of you who like a kind of a killer who is motivated by purpose, then, you know, this movie, I guess, has that. It's relatively kind of well shot and kind of put together on a technical level. What doesn't work in this movie's favour, it is like Vanilla Ice Cream, this one. It's very much a somewhat kind of bland paint-by-numbers slasher movie. In some ways, I wouldn't say this is a bad film, really, but it's just kind of like very much a kind of somewhat generic, flavourless style slasher film. The kills are plentiful, but not spectacular. It's effectively people getting kind of stabbed with a kitchen knife or their throat cut, and you know, it's like one of the things going off on the little tangent is people dying straight away from like a wound like that where they wouldn't die. You know, if it's like a knife to the heart maybe, but a knife to the gut, they're going to bleed out. It's not going to happen straight away. And this is one of these bugbears that happen with horror films. Anyway, but ultimately what I'm getting at is the kills are, you know, high in number but kind of low in impact, if that makes sense. Who the identity of the killer is blindingly obvious, and even with an attempt at a misdirect, it is like the sense of kind of mystery is just, you know, it's just not there because it's just very, very clear about what's actually kind of happening. It signposts it a little bit too much in this movie. The acting is a mixed bag. I think the named actors do a better job. However, there are quite a lot of kind of unknowns in this movie that I think clearly don't have a lot of acting experience, and it shows. And this is not helped by some atrocious dialogue. And I've put a clip at the beginning to kind of demonstrate this. It's just a horrible, unnatural sounding dialogue that is very exposition heavy. We have to tell the audience this, so we're going to kind of write this really clunky dialogue and have our characters say it as a kind of explainer to what's kind of going on. And then we just have these silly kind of logic issues. I'm not going to kind of list every single one, but there's like, just like, this doesn't make sense. I mean, for example, we're led to believe that we have the exact, the kids that were in the camp 20 years ago, that when the original incident happened, all happen to be at this camp now as adults that are working there. It was like, that's convenient, isn't it? I mean, it's just, there's lots of kind of like little things that just don't make sense, to be honest with you. So ultimately, the movie just feels kind of lazy in the kind of the writing department. The movie has no kind of tricks up its sleeve, ultimately. So, in conclusion, I think if you just want a bit of a time waster, you know, a slasher with a kind of a, you know, cool looking mask, but it's pretty much no frills. You know, it's a paint by numbers movie in the greatest sense of the word, but let down by kind of, to be honest with you, quite terrible dialogue. Makes this one for me a below average movie, but not an out and out car wreck. I'll give this one a 4 out of 10. It might be watchable for fans of slasher movies and who just are relatively undemanding, but anyone else who wants a semblance of kind of like cerebral matter in it, then you may want to look elsewhere. 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Please leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.